I keep saying it, but sports are back. We're here. Meaningful baseball games. Big injuries in the NFL. Ripple effects. Coaching controversies. I love how the coach of the Columbus Blue Jackets, and I know he was a former coach of the Leafs, still resonates so deeply here. Felt like people got excited when they saw that story. People in Toronto were like, aha! More evidence for why we were right. Anyway, I'm going to get into that later in the show today. I also got a bunch of messages yesterday about the Weather Network because the app was down. And I realized that, yeah, we're all Jobos. We're all just Joe living off of the app, trying our best to basically just get more and more integrated with our phones. But I got so many people that messaged me like, yeah, I got screwed over by the Weather Network too. It's like, yeah, I mean, we could have just gone outside and looked.
Poke the head out the window.
But I didn't have any faith today. I didn't have any faith in it. I realized because, one, it was so cold this morning that I looked at the Weather Network and I went, first of all, you were down yesterday. You were unreliable. And now I'm supposed to trust that it's freezing cold out there. So I actually went outside first. I went outside. I stood in it for a few seconds. I basked in a T-shirt. I was like a farmer. Like, what's that? Wetting the finger,
gotcha.
Holding it up in the air.
Test the wind.
Yeah, smelling the air. Smells like it's going to be a cold front today.
I
was
feel
like
it
that.
In the knees.
It was good. It was very good. What wasn't good? Toronto Blue Jays. Is this updated?
Yep, it's updated from the games last night.
So I had it wrong yesterday in the tweet that you gave me?
No. It was right, but these are now the new playoff standings because Seattle's now moved ahead of them with their game last night.
Right. So, yeah, it's the same winning percentage.
Yes, sir. 17 and 27.
God, I forgot that Seattle would have jumped up yesterday. So Jays are on the outside looking in.
Yeah, they're number 7 right now.
Cool stuff. Jays are 17. You want to know why they're on the outside looking in? They're 17 and 27 versus the AL playoff teams. So we keep looking at this record and going, how are they so? They're minus 56. Minus 56 in run differential against American League playoff teams. And last night, same thing. Rangers struggling. Everyone talking about how the Rangers are terrible, how their bullpen is something that's extremely vulnerable right now. This team is just not performing very well. Corey Seager's in a bit of a hole right now. This Rangers offense is heating up all of a sudden against the Blue Jays mostly. But yeah, in the series ahead of time. So yeah, good for the Jays. They've pretty much proven they're better than the Kansas City Royals, the Oakland Athletics, and the Colorado Rockies. That we know for sure. They are better than those teams. They are better than the dregs of Major League Baseball. But let me say this again. Toronto Blue Jays, when they've had to face the real teams that they were supposed to measure themselves against this season, 17 and 27 against the teams that are currently sitting in the American League playoffs with a run differential of minus 56. That ain't it. That ain't it. And I still think that they're going to find a way to get into the playoffs. Part of that is because I'm just, a Blue Jays fan and I'm hoping that this thing's going to happen. And I'm just optimistic about, or like you feel like you're the main character, I should rather say. That things are going to break your way. Things are going to get in. And part of me is also, I don't know, I think I've said this before, but part of me keeps looking at this Jays team and saying this regular season has been so disappointing and so underwhelming and so much bitching and so much anger from the fan base, from the hardcore fans, when in reality they have been around it all year long, that it just almost feels like sports destiny to have the team limp into the playoffs and then win a couple of rounds and everyone go, I actually was always a Dalton Varsho guy. I never gave up hope, even though he's OPSing like 570 at home. I remained faithful. I always knew you'd have the guys going, man, you always knew if they had this kind of pitching that they'd be around in October, that they'd still be around in October. So I'm hoping that we have those reverse takes. Obviously, I'm still hoping it. Even as much as I think I feel the same way as a lot of you do, that it's a bit of a hate watch with this group. Like, it's a bit of a hate watch. You're watching them, you're kind of hoping they win, but then the second things start to go bad, you go, yeah, screw these dudes. I knew they were bad. But this is it. This has been the season. It's a team that was supposed to be a contender. It was a team that was supposed to be one of the best in the American League. And so everybody that keeps pointing to you and saying, well, what about the record? And what about the bullpen? And what about the pitching staff? And actually, Vladdy's numbers when people are on base are not so bad. And, well, here's another piece that actually indicates that the Blue Jays, it's like, here's the stats. They're 17 and 27 against other playoff teams in their league. And they've lost to those teams this year by a total of 56 runs. I don't need any other stats. I don't need to take the samples from against the bad teams. I don't want to hear about how you actually measure a good team is how they take care of business against the bad teams. That's not applicable here. That's just not it anymore. Every single time, or I shouldn't use absolutes, but for the most part, what we've seen of the Jays, when they play the good teams, they're not able to live up to the expectation. They're not able to take care of the moment, and they don't handle it. It's exactly what just happened with the Baltimore series. They had their opportunities. Really, the only team that I think they have the tiebreaker with is Houston now, because now that's out the door with Texas. So it's just the window got smaller against Texas where you don't have the tiebreaker. You don't have the tiebreaker against Seattle. Obviously, in your division, you've been pounded by the Baltimore Orioles. And as Joe pointed out yesterday, that minus 56 run differential, that also comes with a bit of an asterisk, which is the Blue Jays beat Tampa Bay 20-1 in a baseball game this year. 20-1. So that minus 56 that's sitting there is actually kind of a flattering portrayal of how the Jays have done against the American League playoff teams. Austin's giving me the shush sign. I don't know what that is. I'm doing a radio show. Oh, to them. I was like, Austin just threw me off so much. Just did the silence sign. I went, this is not, I can't do that, bro. Is Ben Nicholson-Smith there? No, he's not there yet? All right, we're getting Ben Nicholson-Smith in a second here. I'm excited to talk to him because he's always a guy that's had like a really solid pulse of this team throughout the season. He's the guy that really has gone in depth with Manoah. And yeah, just there are some things with this baseball team that are in the now and then in the big picture in the future. And they all just kind of feel like they're starting to connect with one another. Anyway, the other thing that people keep bringing up is, yeah, you know what? I mentioned that record against the American League playoff teams. It's also hard watching. Bo Bichette came off the injury. I don't know. Supposed to give him the benefit of the doubt that he's fully healthy, or maybe you don't. You say that this guy's maybe battling a little bit. But for him and Vladdy to be 0-16 so far in the series is pretty heartbreaking stuff. And it feels gratuitous at this point, the conversations around Vladimir Guerrero Jr., but they're just so justified. It's truly painful watching this guy play at home. The road stats have been better, a little bit better, but like I'm going again tonight. And I say this over and over and over again. I go to a lot of baseball games. I go to a lot of Jays games. I've spent a lot of money at the Rogers Center this year, and I have yet to see a Vladimir Guerrero Jr. home run. I've seen a David Schneider home run. Haven't seen Vladdy. Be nice to see him put one in the seats, just one of these times. Anyways, Ben Nicholson-Smith, host of At the Letter, Sportsnet baseball analyst. What's up, brother?
JD, how's it going? It's good to be talking some baseball with you.
Yeah, it's just not going great. It's not. I like the baseball team. You know, I like baseball. I was really hoping that I would go to a playoff game this year, but I started the show with this, is that, yeah, they're now 17-27 against American League playoff teams with a run differential of minus 56, and that includes a 20-1 Jays victory over the Tampa Bay Rays. Yeah, how much stock do you just put into what your record is against the good teams and what your run differential is in good teams?
That's an interesting question. I think for me, I would say you're always going to do better against bad teams. That's true of Atlanta and the Dodgers and the Astros. You're always going to beat up on the bad teams more. So that's okay. You'd want to have a good record against the good teams. I think the great teams are good against good teams. I'm just not under the impression that the 2023 Toronto Blue Jays are a great team. Now, they could still win playoff series. They could still make the playoffs, but they are definitely a flawed team. So, I'm not surprised that they have, that a lot of their losses have come against those good teams.
Yeah. I think it's pretty indicative of who they are. Just like, yeah, they can beat up on the bad groups. They got really good pitching. And so in these low-scoring games against kind of inept offenses, they can hang around. And then they face these good teams that can actually drive in runs, and then the Blue Jays can't hang with them. Like, that just seems to kind of be the formula to me.
Well, and at a certain point, like home runs are really this is so obvious, right? Like here I am saying home runs are a really important
No,
part
but
of
it's
baseball,
not
but,
obvious
like,
to this fan base because 2015 we got home runs are bad takes from multiple prominent people in the media. So
man.
rally killers was a real thing in this city.
Oh man. Yeah, no, home runs are awesome. Like we like home runs. Home runs are great. Always a pro home run
Yeah.
radio hit when I'm on.
You can look back and say that you were on the right side of history of home runs.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah, with a lot of confidence.
Yeah.
I wasn't anti-home run. So, you need them. They're the best way to score, and they're the best way to close a gap quickly. And also, like, it's really interesting too when you look at the playoffs. This is where like the narrative can start to get out of control. Is not that the Blue Jays have had a deep playoff run, unfortunately, in the last 6-7 years, but as you get deeper into playoffs, sometimes what happens is you'll have people say like, "Oh, there's not enough small ball," and if you look at the numbers, as I'm sure you know, JD, it's actually the home run that does really, really well in October because it's so hard to string together 3 or 4 singles, and it's so hard to put together a hit and run when there is nasty stuff from Spencer Strider falling off the table every few pitches. So yeah, you need home runs. That's a real question for this team. Still, it has been all year. And because you can't complain about the pitching for this team. The pitching has been elite.
No, the pitching's been phenomenal. Outside of, it's kind of funny though, because even with the pitching, it's disappointing because we have the Manoah situation, right? And I'll get to that a little bit later. But as good as they have been as a group, as solid as they have been as a 5, if you would have said, hey, which of the Blue Jays pitchers do you need to be the very best from now and from a future standpoint, everyone would have probably universally agreed that that's Alek Manoah. And so, yeah, it's great that Yusei Kikuchi had to bounce back. It's great financially that Barrios became better, even though I still don't trust Barrios in big games. I don't. I'm sorry. It's not going to be a thing that ever connects with me. My gut says just a little bit of the choker gene or the when things go wrong, things go really wrong gene. But either way, I hate that that's kind of hanging over what has been a brilliant season from this pitching staff. Just a quick one, kind of a side tangent on this before we dive into some of the other stuff, though, is do you think that the Blue Jays will actually look at the home ballpark dimensions, like the ways that they adjusted this park this season, the fences this season, and reevaluate it? Because this was supposed to be tailor-made for the team. Like, the biggest one to me is, Ennis tweeted this yesterday, but like Varsho's home OPS is 538. His road OPS is 755. And everything we learned about the dimensions were, hey, it's about this power alley for left-handed hitters, and that's why they're getting way more left-handed, is that it's just going to be brilliant for these guys. There's going to be a good ballpark for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. There's going to be more home runs here. Like, the Jays haven't been hitting home runs, and they haven't been hitting home runs at home. And it's not going to be an issue come playoff time because now it feels more than likely they're never going to see the Rogers Center when it's meaningful baseball. But have you heard anything in your circles about, hey, you know what, we actually feel like some of this might be to play, and this is at least going to be a conversation during the offseason after already what is a super expensive renovation?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, and it's hard to know how much of this is okay. This offense is sort of underwhelming. How much of this is the park is suppressing it? It'll take more than 1 year to know. And so I would expect the Jays, in all of their public comments about this, and behind the scenes as well, any sort of comment is, we want to see how this plays over the course of multiple seasons. So I would think they'll take a look at it at the end of this year, but I don't know that you get much conclusive info.
By the way, I do want to just say quickly that I think it's probably a little piece of it, but I think mostly it's that these guys have kind of been anti-clutch this year. And when they've been at home and there's been big spots and it's been in front of the crowds, like I think that all these things are connected. The runners in scoring position, the lack of success at home. And yeah, I do look at a guy like Varsho who had a ton of pressure coming into the season, being the front of a trade, a big trade, having to start where he did in the lineup, and then just having just such a tough year. That, yeah, some of these things are connected. It's not all of it. I'm usually a believer in that. It's usually pieces of everything, and then you take all those pieces, connect them all together, and that's how you end up getting the result. But yeah, I am curious as to just, what they would kind of look at this. You're right. I guess this isn't a big enough sample, but what they would look at and say, hey, this is actually enough where we see something a little wrong with the dimensions of these fences, and we want to change something so that there's more home runs. Like, they're good for winning. They're also good for a home ballpark experience where you're at the game and you're having some beers and you're having fun and you're in the seats. And there have been way too many games. And I know Joe was at the game, the first one against Texas. I'm very curious to see how it feels tonight when I go to the series, but the atmosphere has been described as apathetic at times. And a home run ball will quickly change that. That will get people on their feet. That gets the building loud. That gets someone going, hey, I'm going to go up for a beer. This is a longer inning rather than just a quick 1, 2, 3. So anyway, so this is the positive piece of this. Cavan Biggio has actually, it's probably higher than 810 because he had the hits last night. So he had 810 going in last night, OPS since the All-Star break. I mentioned this last week to Ennis, how I like the way he looks at third base. He seems to look kind of better there than he did at second. You're definitely not moving off of Davis Schneider right now, who hit another home run. I don't know. Maybe it's not sustainable. Maybe eventually Davis Schneider comes out of there, but everything he's done has been brilliant so far. You kind of have a bit of a logjam in left field because you want to play Varsho and you want to find another spot for Whit Merrifield when he's healthy, although I don't know exactly how healthy he is. How do you take Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and put him DHing every day off of first? What happens when Chapman returns to Biggio in your estimation?
Yeah, Cavan's been really good.
Right.
And, we've looked at the splits for the last, since the All-Star break, he's among the OP or on-base percentage leaders in the American League. That's great. Since May 1st, he's been, OPS close to 800. And then if you even just look at the season as a whole, his full season, no caveats at all. He has an OPS plus of 100, meaning he's been a league average hitter. That's not something to take for granted when you also throw in the fact that he is, generally speaking, a very adept base runner. He is versatile enough to play multiple positions. This is kind of what you want from Cavan Biggio, right? He's not necessarily your number 2 hitter, but he's a respectable offensive player who can do some things well, give you versatility, and not make mistakes out there. And that's a really good bench player. So when Matt Chapman comes back, to answer your question, I think Chapman plays, he might need the occasional rest day, in which case Biggio can play there. But with Belt on the injured list, there are DH at bats. You can put Biggio at first to give Vladdy a day off his feet. You can put him in really anywhere. So I think Biggio will still play and should still play against a lot of the right-handed pitching. Obviously, you're not going to go out of your way to start him against lefties, but against a lot of the right-handed pitching out there, your best lineup includes Cavan Biggio.
Yeah, I wonder if you're at all a believer in the whole, hey, if you're having success doing something, kind of leave it. I remember talking about this with Randall Grichuk, where he didn't really like moving around. And the guy just wanted to play center field. That was it. He liked playing center field. He felt comfortable with the one position. And with Biggio and even some of these other Blue Jays, and I feel like this has kind of been a Shapiro Atkins special, is that they've brought in these dudes who are supposed to be, hey, I can play multiple positions. But in reality, it's not good at any of those positions. Like, they've always been sort of chasing that Ben Zobrist type. And with Cavan, my only feeling when I'm watching him is, dude, you're good at third base. You're making plays at third base. Another one last night, another beautiful defensive play for him where he makes the diving stab and he gets it across, and the broadcast is talking about his arm strength. And in a sport where I feel as though confidence is so important, and we're even talking about the runners in scoring position and the home road splits as a potentially confidence having something to do with it. If there is any added piece of this saying, it sucks moving this guy off of this spot. It sucks trying to find other places, because even with Brendan Belt out, again, it doesn't feel like there's an overly comfortable lineup that makes sense when he's not at third base right now.
You just gave me flashbacks to Yangervis Solarte and Brandon Drury.
Right.
So thanks for that.
Yeah,
Thanks
you're
for
welcome.
That. But
and then how Drury got good as soon as he left. It was nice. He just immediately started to rake. People were like, have you seen Brandon Drury's numbers? I was like, I don't want to see them. I don't ever want to see them. I was a nightmare watching him live, and now I have to look at a box score where he hit another 2 home runs.
Funny, we never had that conversation about Yangervis Solarte. He just disappeared.
No.
But anyways, with Biggio, he's been really good. And I see what you mean about, hey, some players like to slot in one spot, and I think ideally everyone would, but I also think Cavan Biggio has, throughout his major league career, understood his role, and he's understood that, he's not necessarily going to be given 500 plate appearances at one position on a silver platter, and he's going to have to move around to different spots. That's why he learned the outfield. That's why he learned third base. And you're right. Like it really is actually paying off right now. And the difference is, or one of the differences is, he's a little younger than some of the super utility guys, like the ones that you might get in free agency.
Mhm.
And so at 28, he still has some pretty good athleticism over there to make some nice plays.
What I find actually really interesting in all of this, like the whole how do you make the puzzle pieces fit, is that when I'm looking at guys that should come out of the lineup, one is Varsho, just because, yeah, Varsho against lefties, there's no point. And Varsho, it's almost a conversation where it's like Varsho at home. You're taking out the either prize trade acquisition that you had this year, who, yeah, does a lot of good things defensively, blah, blah, blah. We have to always say that, where it's like every time he makes a catch, everyone needs to freak out about it and be like, that's what he does. He's a defensive guy. Don't remember that he was starting the year hitting in the 4-hole. He's a defensive ace. He's so incredible in the field. That's his value. Fine. But he's either one who should come out. But the thing is like, I guess the reason that I'm bringing this up is you're right. Clearly, Biggio is going to move around. Obviously, they should have some kind of mix of what type of player should be in and out of the lineup, depending on the game. But it's just Chapman has been one of the worst players in all of baseball since the first month of the season. Like, at what point is this a meritocracy, especially considering that this is a guy who is, 99.5% not going to be on your baseball team next year? Like, if he comes back and he's struggling, he's playing the way that he was before he hit the IL, do you think that John Schneider is going to have, I don't know, the ability to tell this guy, you're sitting and you're actually going to end up kind of in a more platoon function at some point?
Man, I mean, I don't know if we're there.
That's what I mean, though. But, dude, he's been horrific. Like, look at the numbers.
Okay. Right. Now, okay, so I think in fairness to Matt Chapman, and I think, this also connects to Vlad Jr., because, Vlad Jr., and this is more of an aside, but like with Vladdy, he's been grinding, right? Like John Schneider said on the weekend, he was physically ill. This is a guy who's really grinding. So
I'd be saying that about
times
Vladdy too, by the way. If I was watching him play that way and I had I had to protect him, I'd be like, you guys, you should look at all the things that he has. He's got like the Mr. Burns amount of diseases right now where they're all just stuck at the door at the very, anyways, sorry, go on.
So Vladdy, he legitimately is grinding and he posts. And with Chapman, like to his credit, he, or credit or blame, whatever you want to say. But after he got injured, after he dropped the weight on his hand in that Cubs series, August 10th through 11th, he tried to play through it and it didn't work. In hindsight, obviously that was a bad decision. He should have just gone on the IL, but it didn't. He tried to do it and it didn't work. And so clearly when we look at those numbers, yeah, like he didn't have a functioning finger. Obviously he wasn't going to be a productive offensive or defensive player. So if and when he comes back, he's fully healthy. To me, like, yeah, like this is a really, really good major league player. I don't think about overcomplicating it. When I think about offense, defense, even going first to third, like Chapman's a really good player. To me, I want him in there every day.
All I know is that he's coming off of a month, where in August, that weight better have had some major impact because, it was 532 OPS. He had a May where it was a 585. He had a June where it was a 356, a 633. Like, good July, but oof. I just basically what I think with this thing is you're in this playoff race. You're desperately trying to cobble together wins. You're trying to work a guy back from injury, but he has been a disaster. I just wonder what the leash is for all of these guys. And honestly, Vladdy should sort of be in that conversation, but to me, that's a little different because you're talking about a guy who's supposed to be a face of the franchise and someone who's supposed to be here for the next couple of years, someone that you still want to work out a contract with. Like, Chapman is, at this point, a mercenary. And so I do think that the rules should be applied differently to him than it should be to Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And that's just where I'm at with it.
Yeah, and I think like if there's a point that, like if Chapman's hurt or if someone is not performing, and if you have reason to believe that they're not going to be at their best, then you obviously have to field the best lineup you can. I just think you can get to a point where maybe like if they're playing a huge game against the Rays in a week's time, and we look at the bench and it's like Matt Chapman and Vlad Guerrero Jr., and on the field we have Spencer Horwitz and Cavan Biggio, it's like, have you just overcomplicated things? Are you just trying to overthink this? And like at a certain point, Vlad Jr., Matt Chapman, to me, if those guys are healthy, that's where you can actually sort of just turn your brain off and put them out
Mhm.
there and hope and trust that good things are going to happen.
Yeah, the only thing is that the Buffalo Blue Jays have been kind of the guys carrying this team. So
Yeah, they've been
just
great. They've
yeah,
been great. But I
exactly.
think too, like, here's the other thing, like with someone like Ernie Clement, and
Yeah.
like what a great story. Give Ernie Clement full credit. But like offensively and defensively, you don't think that there are going to be things that get exposed if Ernie Clement's playing 7 days
No,
a
but
week.
he's not in the mix for me. Like this is basically coming down to
Horowitz
a
then.
yeah, just a bench bat to me, Horowitz. Like that's
Yeah.
when you're fully healthy, that's a bench bat. What I think is the only guy that's in this equation that's sort of messing things up because yeah, you would probably just have Cavan or Witt at second base. The problem is that I think you need to be playing Davis Schneider every single day now. Like I don't
Yeah.
know. Yes, is there an argument to be made about when the sample size gets bigger that Davis Schneider is not going to be Davis Schneider? Sure. Should his leash be extremely short? Like if he starts to string together games where he doesn't look like a tough out, then yeah, he's out. It's an easy decision for John Schneider. But as of right now, you have to ride him. There's
Agreed.
no excuse for not playing Davis Schneider right now. He is without a doubt your best bat. Like when he steps up to the
Yep.
plate, I feel like he's either getting on base or he's the best power threat right now. So he's in the lineup. And that's where the ripple effect with everybody else has because now you can't put Cavan Biggio at 2 and you can't put Witt at 2. It's got to be Davis. And so that's where I keep looking at this thing and saying, how do you make the rest of the pieces fit? That's where the overcomplication has. And frankly, for me personally, like you don't need to comment on this, but I don't have a lot of faith in the manager, man. And I went on a rant yesterday about this, but John Schneider has turned me from someone who was basically a never blame the manager guy. Well, I should say that one of the legacies of this front office has turned me from a, hey, blaming the manager is totally the easiest thing to do. It's usually the lamest thing to do. It's usually the number one thing that makes me eye roll at a fan, and I hate doing that. But when people get pissed off, my new thing, by the way, is just whenever people are mad at Guillermo Martinez or like the hitting coach, that's my new eye roll thing. Where I'm like, really, this is what you take. But I'm kind of with the fans now. I'm kind of with the people that I hated the most, who would be so pissed off about the manager, and I have been now for 2 straight years. Where I just don't trust the decision making of Schneider, whether it's the handling of some of the pitchers lately, whether it's some of the lineup machinations. Like, I don't know how much of a touch he has over this roster. And so I'm just going to say this. How much control do you think he has right now? Like, when some of these decisions are coming through, like Bassett the other night or Kikuchi in the Royals series, how much of that is him versus the khakis?
Versus first of all, they're on the same team.
Uh-huh.
I don't think that I don't think it's a versus, like they're versus the Texas Rangers, and
Yeah, fine.
like the khakis. Oh my goodness, I'm not sure how to necessarily start. I'll start with the Davis Schneider. I agree, Davis Schneider has to be in the lineup every day. I agree. I think yeah, he's been so good. I think like with John Schneider and his management, yeah, like he has a lot of input from people in the front office who wear various types of business casual attire,
Yeah,
including but not limited to
yeah,
khakis, quarter zips,
yeah.
polos,
Yeah, a lot
the
of quarter
normal
zips.
range.
Quarter zips,
Yeah,
definitely. That's what we should
oh,
be calling them. But yeah,
quarter zips left and right. Yeah, you'll see some jeans in there on a casual. Like, I don't know,
hmm
man. They wear all kinds of
on a
stuff.
cool
Like,
day.
and yeah, yeah. So you ever like the GM meetings, by the way, like the GM meetings are something else. That's where you see so many quarter zips at the GM meetings. It's wild. It's like me and Shy are like the only ones there not wearing quarter zips.
You
It's a
should
good
actually
time.
throw some quarter zips on just so people give you the double take and maybe you actually get leaked some kind of information because someone sees you from
Oh
behind.
yeah.
It's like, hey, taps you on the shoulder. It's like, what do you think about this move? And then you turn, it's a
Oh,
GM. You're like,
totally.
gotcha.
When I when I
Gotcha.
was younger, when I was younger and I would go to the winter meetings, I
Mhm.
got mistaken for a job seeker like all the time
Love
because
that.
you'll see. Yeah. Anyway, I don't think that's what you asked, but yeah. So when it comes to John Schneider and his management, yeah, there have been calls that have backfired. There have been
Mhm.
moments that haven't gone well this year. I think managers can have slumps too, and I think John Schneider's really capable of being a good major league manager. And I think the best possible time for him to prove that is in the next 2.5 weeks.
Mm.
But I think, too, to your point around Guillermo Martinez and the hitting coaches, like, there are interesting questions out there when it comes to, what accountability looks like after this season. We'll get there in due time.
Mhm.
We'll have those discussions, after the season. But in the meantime, this is the best possible chance for John Schneider to prove his doubters wrong. And this is his first, just coming off of his first full season as a major league manager. I think, of course, there were going to be a few bumps. I still think he's thinks things through tactically in a way that will lead to success as a major league manager. But we'll see. He hasn't done it yet, so we'll see.
Yeah, it feels to me a little bit like I love my Leafs cross references. It just feels a little bit like you got put in a situation too soon. Like with Kyle Dubas, he gets handed the Leafs GM job, and I think Kyle Dubas got a lot better. Now I do think that he is one of the better executives in all of hockey. It just is. You look at the recent track record; it's pretty solid. Look around the game. I feel as though Kyle Dubas learned on the job a little bit, and I feel that way with John Schneider at times, where I go. I agree with what you're saying. I was a believer in John Schneider. I didn't think that he should get canned unless it was going to be for Terry Francona. Like, I always want what is the other option? But now looking back on it, it's a little bit of a difficult look for me anyways, that when you were in a title contention window, and I get it with Charlie, and Charlie Montoyo was, by all reports, not their first guy. They went through, they tried to get a bunch of different managers. It wasn't an overly attractive job at the time. They swung and missed on some dudes. They brought in Charlie, and he was supposed to be kind of, hey, I'm going to help raise some of the young guys here. And when the time to make the transition is going to happen, someone else is going to come in here. It's going to be a steadier hand at the wheel. And I know, like, he's got coaches around him. Like, Don Mattingly's there. So it shouldn't be just like, oh, they have no baseball experience in the room. Like, they have them there. That's what I always find so strange when people go, well, Mattingly should be the manager. I'm like, why? You think that he's holding back the secrets? Like, you think he's refraining from telling these guys what his opinion is? But it's just like, if they miss the playoffs this year, or, they go out completely meekly, and you look at this and say, well, how many of these were potential wins for a manager? Was he worth plus or negative wins? If he's worth anything close to negative, if he is worth negative, I think that you have to look at Atkins and say, hey, why did you hire two completely inexperienced managers in the second one when you were trying to win a championship? Like, yeah, I don't know.
And that would be on Ross Atkins, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately, Ross Atkins can't fire a manager every year, and they fired Charlie, 14 months ago. So, clearly, John Schneider this is his job. He was signed to a 3-year deal. It's not even really a discussion if he's here. But again, I think that tactically, there are lessons to be learned from last year's playoff run. John Schneider has watched that footage I don't know how many times. Like, he's definitely learned from that. And now's the time to apply those lessons and to prove that, because with 17 games left, I think you mentioned this off the top, JD, but the other thing is the Jays functionally are not in a playoff spot right now. So it's like you have 17 games to pass at least one of these teams. If you don't do that, your season's done, and it is without any kind of question of failure.
Yeah, and you got to pass them now. You can't tie them. Like, tying the Mariners and tying the Rangers is now over. And I just don't think it's going to be Houston that ends up at the end of the day that you're going to end up in a tiebreaker with. Okay, so here's just a couple quick rapid fires before I get into the final big topic, which is Manoah. But number one is trusting Richards over?
For now, yeah.
Yeah. It is, right? Like, guy's one of the stories of the season, but it feels like they can't go to him in any type of leverage or any type of moment in any more big games.
Yeah, like, to me, trust in the bullpen is gained and lost pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So for now, he's not in that trust circle, however you want to put it. I think, you could say the same maybe for Chad Green. I'm not sure if he's ever really entered that.
No.
But yeah, I don't think Richards is in there right now, and maybe that changes in 10 days, but not right now.
Yeah, I just wonder if part of the reason that we saw the Bassett maneuver and even Ryu going into and Ryu was pitching well, but Ryu pitching deeper into a ball game than he's normally done all season long, and I know his season has been shorter, but has something to do with the fact that they don't trust as many guys in this bullpen right now as they did even just a few weeks ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other thing is, like, they're in a stretch now where they play like a lot of games in a row. I mean, it's at least 10 games in a row. So you're going to have to lean on your starting pitching a little bit more until you have the off day around the corner. Like, I just think at this point in this, and the Jays have done this all season, and their starters have responded so well. I mean, when we think back, one of the overlooked things about this season is that entire month of June when they ran a 4-man rotation for like a month and kind of got away with it. So they've leaned on the starters all year. It's kind of been what their MO, and it's mostly worked. So I sort of get it when you're in a stretch like this and your bullpen is gassed in some cases.
Could the Jays bring back Ryu? I thought about that yesterday. It's like completely was not discussed, and it felt like, hey, maybe he's not even part of the rotation this year, but like he's clearly somewhat like the same guy, and he's proven that so far. And I love it when he's throwing in the 60s and he's getting strikes or he's freezing guys. This is one of my favorite things about the Blue Jays right now. And yeah, he comes with a lot of injury prone. He's not going to get a ticket that's around $20 million, but what do you think the market's going to be like for a player like that? And Toronto has the comfortability. They know him. They know the medicals. It's just, do you think that he has a shot at returning here?
I would say he has a shot. If I was the Jays, I would definitely have interest in Ryu. I mean, I just think he's really good, first and foremost. Secondly, like he's a calm presence. He's very much a professional. He does things well around the field. I think he's a guy you want on your team for sure. He's not going to create drama or complicate things. So to me, it's a question of price. Like I think the term is 1 year. So it's a question of how many dollars. And like if I'm a Blue Jays team that's losing Kiermaier, Merrifield, Belt, and Chapman to free agency, and I already have a pretty strong rotation, most of my resources are going to be going to position players and trying to add multiple bats.
Yeah.
But there's always room to add pitching. And so if Ryu was up for signing, like, I don't know, 7.5 over 1 with incentives, I'd probably be open to that. But if the number goes up to 13, I'm probably wishing him luck somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I do wonder if another team that doesn't have all the medicals is going to be handing him that kind of money, even on a 1 year deal. Like,
yeah. And it might be less. Like, I'm just throwing those numbers out there.
No, for sure.
Like
I get what I get what you're saying. It's just that if you're the Blue Jays and you're looking at this and you're trying to return what is going to essentially be your entire starting rotation, and that's going to be kind of a teaser for the final question, is like, yeah, might not be that bad to have a guy who you're allowed to have the extra day's rest with and you can handle a little bit differently, and then hope that he's this guy at the end of the year where, he's just a very reliable starting pitcher, someone who, you can count on for those solid 5 innings, especially given that extra bit of rest. Okay, but are you all going to have all 6? Because here, I'll just tell you how I interpreted reading your piece.
Sure.
Bad. So bad. So incredibly bad. Like, I know you wrote it like, hey, it's just like he thinks he's hurt and they have spent a ton of money saying you're actually not. All these doctors agree. All these medical professionals agree that you're fine. And he's like, you don't know my body. And historically with sports, when there's disagreements about how to handle an injury and it involves like not actually fulfilling your contract obligations and not going and pitch it, like going and performing at any level and just deciding to shut it down, that it doesn't usually end with like, hey, in the summer we actually found common ground and we like each other again and we figured out that both of us were being a little silly. It's usually like, so I think we should go different ways.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, exactly. See, I thought I was all right at interpreting that piece.
that was a very full interpretation. I like you just put it out there. So I think it's clearly like the relationship between Manoah and the Jays, like they've had a lot of conversations since the 10th or 11th. I don't have it in front of me. The last time he pitched, there have been a lot of conversations, right? Medically, they're trying to get on the same page. They're trying to get this on the same page about what's next, where he goes, what that looks like. So even though we haven't heard from Manoah publicly, and we've barely heard from the Jays on this publicly as well, understandable now. I mean, they're in a playoff race. They're obviously not sitting there worried about a guy who's not going to pitch for them this year. But there have been these conversations behind the scenes, and I think I think it's pretty clear there have to be more conversations, and there has to be some sort of resolution here as to what this looks like going forward. Because whatever has happened, and there's obviously. It hasn't gone well this year. He's still a member of the Toronto Blue Jays organization on their 40-man roster and potentially a part of their major league team. That's the goal that everyone would want. So there is, I think, some ground to cover here in the coming months, because it's not where anyone would want it to be right now.
It's so strange watching all the commercials of the Jays games where he's so prominently featured in every commercial. And it's just that reminder of, right, him, the guy the Cy Young runner-up guy. He's just there. He's omnipresent. But my guess is right now that those conversations that need to happen, there's not a lot of them happening. My guess is this is very much a relationship that is strained and where there's not a lot of texting between the two sides. That this is you go away and do your thing and we'll revisit this later. But I am a Blue Jays fan. I would say that I'm pretty spooked about what the potential of this would be. Because if Alek Manoah decides like he's done with this organization and that he's been mistreated and mishandled and that he tried to buy into the Florida Complex League, but then like this is, I'm basically laying out my interpretation of things, then wasn't given a fair shake when he came back, when he returned, that he maybe was trying to gut it out through a little bit of tweak, a little bit of something, that he doesn't want to potentially admit that some of it was mental, that maybe he's putting a bit more of it on the physical than it needed to be. But then they start to disagree, and a strong personality like that, someone who probably feels very embarrassed about the year that he had, considering going into it, how brash he is. And I like that about him, but it's just like that's what comes with the territory of this, right? And I just, I can't help but think about Stroman, how we've made all these Stroman comparisons where it's like, he's Stroman, except he's better and he's more of a team guy. It's like, well, we'll see. We'll see. I could see the same kind of departure. The question is, what the hell are you going to get back in a trade if he wants out and you can't make this work when he's coming off of the year that he just had? It just, oof. Anyway, this is for a different day, but there is a pretty dark path that the Jays might have to walk here if they can't have the conversations, that become a little bit more productive than I'm guessing they are right now. I love conversations with you, buddy. You know that. It's always fun. I'll be down at the ballpark tonight, so pray for me.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Should be fun. Should be fun.
Should
Just on
be
Manoah
fun.
real quick.
Yeah, should be so fun. I'm going with McKee, Ennis, and Murphy, and I can't wait. So McKee's already set in his classic fan grounds of I don't want to go. You guys are basically forcing me to go to this baseball game.
Wow.
And I already know that the second things go wrong, he's going to be in full pout, full anger. I want to go home, not talking to anybody, catatonic. Just, it's going to be a miserable night. Ennis and I are going to be yelling at each other. Poor Blake's just going to be sitting there trying to mediate. Like, this could be a true friendship ending night for four guys who like each other. It
could be a lot of yelling.
Oh, dude.
Yeah, it sounds like things could get really emotional.
Oh,
really
yeah,
fast.
that's
like
it. That's
one bobble, one Santiago Espinal, E4, and all of a sudden you guys are just yelling at each other.
I know. It's not going to be pleasant. It's like the Jays. Please win, Jays, for the sake of friendship. Like for friends, please win. Please win. Ennis with 3 IPAs and me with 18 Bud Lights. It's bad. It's a bad combination with us yelling at each other, misinterpreting takes we've had over the course of the entire year with sad Sammy in a seat. Oh, yeah. Anyways, thanks for making time today, buddy.
Yeah, you got it. Glad to talk, and we'll talk soon, I hope.
Absolutely. See ya. There's Ben Nicholson-Smith, host of At the Letters, Sportsnet baseball analyst, just overall the man. Again, I've always said one of the highest approval ratings I've ever seen at anybody at any company. Be like BNS. So the Manoah thing, I get it. The Jays are in a playoff race, and if you're writing about the Blue Jays and you're following the Blue Jays and you're a fan of the Blue Jays, you do want to just focus on the now, right? You just want to focus on the team and the run and this and that. But again, it's a little bit like the Raptors, where a different sport, we knew that they had zero shot at winning a championship. And as hard as this is to hear for some people, the Jays absolutely still have a shot at winning a World Series this year. Like, they have a really good pitching staff and they have a bullpen that has shown a lot this year, that has a ton of talent in it. And if they get in, they're going to be a threat to anybody. They just are. They're going to be able to win some scrappy games, even though I pointed out all this record. But the likelihood is pretty low. But a modern-day sports fan, I don't apologize for the looking into the past and looking into the future. I've always said modern-day sports fan is a time traveler. You live in multiple realities at different times. So some of us, or me, is looking back and saying, boy, seems like a bit of a mistake to have brought in 2 rookie managers in a contention window. And for a team that has had maturity issues, Schneider seemed like kind of the tough, rough guy because he was coming off of Charlie Montoya. But ultimately, yeah, maybe not. Maybe it's not a steady enough hand at the wheel. Maybe they did need somebody. I'm a big player accountability guy. It should have been the players. They should have been taking a hold of this team. But yeah, they've kind of melted down in big moments this year, and it has felt a little loose. And then Schneider has had some really poor decision making. And so you put all that together and you say, damn, those couple of wins that a better manager might have been worth is the difference between you being outside of the playoffs right now and you being in. You having a tiebreaker with one of these teams and you not. So I don't apologize for this. 2, same thing with Manoah stuff. You're looking at the future and you're saying, all right, so you're going to have Gossman back. You're going to have Barrios back. You feel much better about that. You're going to have Kikuchi. Those 3 guys, set in stone, solid. Bassett, same thing. Bassett, aging, but hasn't really had too many indicators that he's slowing down. He had a good August when he had a horrible one last year. So good. You're feeling solid about those 4 guys. What is the 5 hole going to look like? Do you really trust that Manoah is going to be back? Because this is a very different baseball team if you get back a Cy Young runner-up at the top of your rotation who's figured it out and found himself again versus a guy who wants out of the organization and who's a prominent figure amongst the young guys, someone who you thought was going to be one of the faces of the franchise. Like, think about the future of your ball club. If you go from, hey, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is an MVP caliber player to what the hell is Vladdy Jr.? He's a guy that we're talking about how he's grinding. Okay. He's grinding. He had a worse season than Brandon Belt, the 35-year-old with a broken back. Tough. Tough look, Vladdy. Bo Bichette, obviously solid. He's got his money. Maybe it's more workable there. He's having a tough series, but anybody who's overreacting to that now, you got to be a bit of a bozo. Like, Bo has pretty much proven who he is at this point in the major leagues, and that is a stud. Whew. And then you're supposed to have Manoah. That was kind of your new triumvirate. And 2 of those guys are on pretty shaky ground, but one of them just like straight up might not want to be here. That's it. He just might not. And to assume that, oh, don't worry, that this thing's going to all work out. Like I said, go through the history of athletes that have had disagreements with medicals. That's one of the worst things you can have, is when a player's like, this isn't right, and I don't like how the medical staff is treating me, and the team's like, we stand by the medical staff, and we're trying all things we can do, but eventually you're going to have to try to go out and perform and honor your contract. We knew.
Kawhi.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I'll decide how to handle this injury. Well, no, because we can't let you do that, Kawhi. And how does that end up working? For a year, is you say, you can decide everything, Kawhi. But Alek Manoah and Kawhi Leonard.